This is episode 243 of the Focused Mindset podcast. And today we're going to talk about how your kids are not giving you the full story. What questions might you ask to be able to help them give you the full story? And what might be the problem with the communication? We're going to talk about that today. This is the podcast that we adjust our mindset so we can build strong connections and have amazing conversations using the solution-focused approach. I'm Cher. I'm a school counselor, I'm a TEDx speaker, and I'm a solution-focused specialist. And on this podcast, we take our thoughts captive and we look at ways that we can rise up and be the person we were always meant to be, not only for ourselves, but for those that we serve. Now, you can jump over to our website, thefocusedmindset.com, to learn more about our products and services, or over to Amazon to get the journaling notebook, 30 Days to Higher Hopes. So, let's get started. Now, I want to let you know that this is a subject I've been thinking about for a while in my own school community. And I'm hoping to clip some of the parts of this podcast and actually make a video for my community at my school, because I see this as an issue so much where parents want so badly to communicate well with their kids. And there's some little tweaks that can happen and it can just end up being so much more effective. And it actually can be a benefit to your child to be able to empower them to even do better at school. Now, I know that I don't talk about parenting per se very often anymore, but you might remember that if you go back into the beginnings of my podcast, I think probably the whole first 100 episodes were mostly about parenting. So if you absolutely love this subject, you can go back. I actually first named my podcast Parenting 2.0, The Focused Mindset. And then as time went on and I started speaking at places, I just changed it to the Focused Mindset. And here we are. Of course, being a school counselor, we end up talking about these subjects that we know can work well with our family as well as with others, and how we navigate our jobs and the people around us. Right now, we're going to talk about those conversations we have with our kids. This can also be conversations we have with our loved ones. And I see a problem frequently. Parents fully 100% believe that they have the full story. They believe that the kids talked to them and told them everything that happened. Let me give you an example. Let's say a kid hops in the car with their parent and they immediately tell them about their favorite part of the day, recess, but today it wasn't their favorite. They had a big old conflict. So they tell you all about the conflict and how it happened and what was said. And then that's all they talk about. Well, they were at school for, I don't know, 6 hours, whatever it was. And that was what was on their mind. That is important. And we acknowledge that. But was it all that happened? Absolutely not. They had a whole rest of their day that they left out. Now, that's not the only example of how kids are not telling their parents always the full story, but it's one really realistic example. Sometimes they get in the car and some parents have trouble of saying, "I'd be happy if I got anything out of them." Say, "What happened at school?" "Nothing." "Oh, nothing. You've been gone for this many hours. Absolutely nothing happened." And other times they do tell you, but they tell you only, some part that stands out to them in that moment. Well, I want you to be able to use the time that you have with your kids most effectively. See, ideally, what do we want out of our communication with our kids? What is our ultimate goal? Sometimes, and in many cases, it's because we want to grow close to them, because we want to know about them. We want to know about their life. We want to be able to be connected. Also, we want to be able to be helpful to them. We want to be a resource that they feel comfortable sharing with us so we can help them when they need it. Sometimes we just want to be able to talk and find out what's going on in their life. We want to be in the loop, right? There's lots of reasons. I also often think about, through my communication right now, I'm setting up habit that could last a lifetime? What kind of of communication do I want with my kids now, in the next phase of their life, into adulthood? I'm setting the groundwork right now. Many times I counsel kids, teenagers, and even young adults, and they'll be like, when I was a kid, we never talked. So why should we start talking now? And other times they'll be like, well, it's always been this way. So what habits are we forming? What do you want them to be saying about you later, about their childhood? But more importantly, what kind of communication do you want to have when they're older? If you want them to be able to think, oh, the first person I want to tell about this is my parent, that thought will only happen if you had communication with them that was helpful and beneficial and warm, and just whatever it is that gives us that feeling of being like, I want to call them, right? So let's talk about a few different scenarios. And I wrote down some notes here about how we can get the full story from our kids. How can we not only get the full story, but also help that conversation be beneficial to both us and our child? The other day, I was outside with a student, and I was actually just outside on the playground because I do that a lot. And I just saw one student walking towards the bathrooms with the grumpiest, most upset look on her face. And so I said, hey, do you want to be alone or do you want to talk about it? She wanted to talk about it. So she talked about some issues that she's been having for a while now when she's playing handball. And then she said something interesting. She said, I always tell my mom about this. I tell my mom about this all the time. And I was thinking, wow, it's so great that she feels comfortable talking to her mom about this every single day. What a great resource for her. And I said, well, what does your mom say? And she goes, well, she agrees with me. These kids are mean. And from that recollection, now her mom may have given her a ton of just different types of advice, but her memory right then went just that far. And it made me wonder about all the different conversations when kids get into the car. How many times kids, and I just say get into the car, it might be whenever you guys see each other, whenever your best time is to talk. Kids will share the part that is really pressing in their mind, but it's much more challenging for them to take the conversation further into how they solved the conversation, the conflict or the problem. Or if it's not solved yet, how did they get through the day? How did they make it? And that's the piece of the puzzle that oftentimes is missing when our kids vent. So the first situation that we're going to talk about is when your kids vent. When your kids vent to you, it feels really great, right? That you're there in the loop with them and you're in it with them. It's like you're almost like you're living it with them. But if you want the full story, you don't only want to live the conflict and the problem. You don't want to stop there. You want to hear all the way through how your child solved it, what they said that they maybe aren't so proud of, and if so, how did they make up for that? What they did that made it better, where they're at right now in the process of, how after recess did they come back to class and did they begin to start working again? And how did they come to make it to the end of the day and into your car right then? Now, many times their answer will be, I don't even know, it's horrible. But I can tell you from being on the school campus that many times there's lots of problem solving and resolving and thoughts, and them being able to get over hard feelings and being able to set it aside for the sake of learning and process it at a later time, or all of these important life skills that they are learning while they're away from you. And so let's think about the fact that we want to hear the story from the beginning and then not miss the end of how they dealt with it. You might find that you're extremely proud of the words that they said and how they said it. And one of my favorite questions to ask when my child is telling me about a really, really tough time, even though everything within me wants to jump in and maybe just give my 2 cents and be like, oh, it's frustrating. A really great thing for me to say is, how did you get through that today? What did you do to get to the other side? Or I'll say a simple, what happened next? Now, if they say, I don't know, I was just so upset and the teacher wasn't even helpful. She didn't call me though, and you made it clear till the end of the day. I mean, some people might have lost it so badly that they couldn't go on, and somehow you made it to the end of the day, which is pretty admirable. So what did you do? How did you do it? What skill did you use that you found within you? What happened? So you're helping them tell you the full story, because how can you celebrate with them the things that they're doing that are solving problems, that are resolving conflict, that are moving on when something's not going just right, if you don't inquire about the next step? Many times our bad is that we stop ourselves right at the conflict. And we actually are the ones continuing that conversation. Well, what happened next? And what happened next? Oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. What is the school doing about this? How many times do you have to worry about this? Why are you even playing with that kid? Right? There is a time and place for actually hashing out the whole problem, right? Before we are so quick to go there, I encourage you to hear the full story. There might be that your child is using so many problem-solving skills. And if you can help them uncover that, then you could say, wow, you've tried so many things. What are you thinking about trying next? So you're not jumping right in and being like, do this, do that. You're allowing them to think through this life problem that they're in the middle of, and solving it much like you might help them with their homework. Now, if you have a project that a kid comes home is like, I have to do a project, you have two choices. You can either make them do it, you can co-construct it with them, or you can just kind of like do it for them and be like, here, you sit there and color that. I have the whole plan in mind. When we have science projects come in or history day projects come in, we can usually tell somewhat how much the parents were involved with those projects. As they get older in junior high, high school, they have to take those reins more and more. But nonetheless, a lot of times when they're younger, it's like, oh, come on now. How much work did you actually do on this? The parents take control. And do we do this in conversations? Do we take control of the conversation? And then all of a sudden, we're the ones leading it. We're the ones driving it. We're the ones that are demanding for answers or coming up with solutions, and sometimes just plowing forward and doing it without. Then all of a sudden, the problem that was their problem and theirs to solve now is your problem, and that rubs them wrong. It does. It bothers kids somehow many times when that agency is taken away from them in a situation that is their social world that they need to solve, or their world with their teacher, or their world within their class. In high school, when they're dealing with so many different teachers, sometimes you're always going to hear about the same teacher that's their struggle. Many times in that scenario, I'll ask, well, what about the teacher you enjoy the most when everything's going right in that class? What are the strategies that are working for you there? What's making it work there? Could you bring any of those things in with this other teacher, even though it's a different personality, that could at least help you get through it? Finding out what they're doing that's working, what is going well in the day that is allowing them to succeed, and then how can we allow them to open their eyes to ways that they can utilize that same skill elsewhere to be able to find success. It's important that we don't accidentally give the feeling to our kid that everything they do is right and every opinion they have is the best opinion in the whole wide world, and all of that, because that's just not actually true. Another way that kids don't always tell parents the full story is that they want to have you like them. They want you to see the best in them. They want the two of you to be on the same page more than anything. They also want to avoid trouble. So when they tell the story, much like we do when we retell stories in our life, they retell it oftentimes not only from their perspective, but also making them look like the best in that scenario, right? This is the version that is not only from my eyes, but also I'm doing the best thing and all of them are not. This is not them lying. All right. This is not them being like, oh, I'm going to be sneaky. This is them thinking, oh, wow, I was good in this. And here's how I was good. And just kind of leaving out the other details. And when they're called out on it, the parents are like, you lied to me. You didn't say what happened. You didn't tell me that beforehand you walked by and said, ew, I hate your outfit before they ran over and jumped on you. You conveniently left that out and said, oh, no, I was just talking about clothes. It wasn't their clothes. You know what I mean? So it happens so often, and it happens with kids that are there. It's not like, oh, these are malicious kids just trying to lie. No, they are trying to paint the best picture of them. As a matter of fact, they do what we all do as humans. They kind of rethink about the situation that just happened, especially if they were called out by their teacher, and they begin to design the story in their mind that kind of fits the version of themselves that they want. Yes, they do that. Know that they're telling you the story in that way. Just assume that they're telling you the story in that way. And you're meant to listen to that side of the story. That is many times their exact reality and exactly how they look at it. Sometimes it isn't exactly how they look at it, but they're trying to hide things that they did. Other times it is exactly how they look at it. They're not able to step outside and see the other point of view. Either way, you can have a part in that. You can have a part in that to help them complete their own story. To be like, oh, well, if I was standing above you, like if there was a drone above you, tell me the story from that perspective. What would they see? If I was looking at it from your friend's eyes, what do you think they would tell me? Tell me about it from your friend's point of view. And now, whoa, you're going to get a picture. You're not doing it in a way that you're about to get them in trouble for any of those perspectives. You're doing it out of curiosity. And it's got to come from curiosity if it works. Kids are so intuitive. I see that with substitutes. When they have a sub that within a few minutes they've read them, figured them out, and known if they think that they can run all over them or not. Look, that intuitiveness doesn't go away with you or anybody else. They can think, oh, wait, my mom's mood and tone just changed. I don't think she liked what she heard. I'm going to just change this story a little bit to make it sound a little bit more in my favor, right? So then it's our job to disarm that tone and disarm the ability for them to have an edge or like, oh my, how's mom going to react to this, or dad? How's grandma, grandpa, whoever, the person that they're talking to, the adult, and say, I'm just really curious about looking at it from a different point of view, and then remain curious. Remain in that place, clear till the end of the conversation to make sure you get the full story. Not to make sure you get all of the terrible facts down that are negative, so you can find out the whole story of how they're dealing with it, exactly how they're looking at it, so you can help them look at it from different perspectives. And then after you look at different perspectives, right, if you are in that stage, you might say, well, based on all these perspectives, what do you think you might do? Do you have any new thoughts of what you might do to solve this problem? And then they're like, I don't know, maybe I'll try this, maybe I'll try that, giving them agency to be able to handle their social problem. And then you jump in when it's necessary to be their advocate, not to save them. Not to save them. We want to save our kids so much from pain and heartache and problems. We want to save them from kids that aren't being nice. But in the world, they're going to come across that. And the school is where they learn to deal with that. This is where they're going to learn their perspective of life, whether they're going to walk through life with a victim mentality, seeing problem after problem, or whether they're going to be able to see how to rise above a problem and how to see the full picture, they can do one or the other, because they're going to come across problems. They're going to come across either struggling with being a part of a group that's being mean, or maybe the one that's being mean. And how are they going to deal with that? Or they're going to be dealing with the person that's being treated poorly. And how are they going to deal with that? Friendships are going to change. It's so important that we want the full story from our kids, not from the perspective of, let's make this problem, the problem bigger, this problem bigger. Now the problem is you. The problem is everything. No, there's a solution to every problem. And life is 50-50. As much as they share about something that happened that's not so good, there is equally, if not more, that happened in their day that was good. Even if they chose to put it aside, take a deep breath, think about something else, and do their reading, and their teacher got through the entire reading thing without them crying about what happened on the playground, that's worthy of celebration, because somehow they had to do that. You weren't there with them. You did it. You're getting through hard things. Now, what else can we do on the playground? What are some of the ideas? What are some of the outlets that you have? Some idea. Maybe you need to talk to the counselor. That's a lot of times when that happens. Or it doesn't happen. And then the problem is so big by the time it comes to me that it's far beyond what we can get ahead of. And kids are getting in trouble and hurt. And I'd rather avoid all that. And so would you. So it's the pre-conversations that you have that help with that. I've had parents that kind of like, they see a problem and in their mind, they're like, I am going to make this school solve this problem. And the kid is the only one that's here at the school. So they begin to inadvertently, like, or maybe on purpose, like kind of grill the kids about what happened today. What happened today? And they're wanting to kind of like build up to see if this is something that happens all the time in case they need to go to the district or whatever it is. The problem is that when that scenario happens, the kid is like, oh, wow, this is how I bond with my parent. I tell them about what's going wrong at school. And in the day, they're looking for the things going wrong. What am I going to tell my mom today? What am I going to tell my mom today? And when they see that it goes wrong, they crystallize it in their mind. They focus on it. And then they build the story. How am I going to tell my mom? Not that it isn't real, but now look at all this time in the day that they've focused on their problem. It's not a good idea for their mental health or their stability or their future happiness to have a child focusing on the problem and reporting the problem and then practicing problem talk, basically is what this is. This entire thing I'm giving you is rooted in the most fundamental communication skills that you can find in solution-focused therapy. And the solution-focused is rooted in focusing on what is working. There is something working, and let's celebrate that. I wonder if you guys can hear all the kids. I'm doing this for both, like I said, my school community and use it for a podcast. So there's kids outside. Anyway, getting back to the subject. It is critically important that kids begin to see not only a problem, but even more so that they see that there is a solution to every problem. We talked a minute ago about how life is 50-50. How are they going to be able to see the other 50 if we don't help them with that? Okay. So they want this love and attention from their parent. They want this great feeling that it feels like for them to be talking and collaborating and, oh my goodness, this happened. And mom's like, what happened? Oh my gosh, they said that. Then what did they say? I've even known some parents that, like, first thing you do, write down everything that happened at school. And unfortunately, they're writing everything bad that happened in school. So that's all they can see is the bad that is happening at school. It's such an interesting phenomenon because it comes from a great place from the parent of like, I'm going to support them, but it has an opposite effect with the kid where they begin to see nothing but problems. And it actually causes them to dislike school because they're ignoring the things that are going well and highlighting the things that are going wrong all day long. But what if you did that in your relationship? Man, you would be breaking up so fast if you constantly focused on your significant other's problems all the time. We know that that's not going to help. We know that focusing on the things that are getting on our nerves is not the way to have a healthy relationship. We deal with those. They're part of things. But then we remember, oh, but I love the way they make me laugh. I love this experience. We think about the things that go well. And that's how a relationship lives long, flourishes, and grows. Because there's always, life is 50-50, right? But we got to train our mind to do that. Something else I wanted to mention is our desire, and again, as humans, to kind of talk crap, talk, just complain and gossip, right? And be careful about getting into that mode with your kids too, because again, you're telling the story, they're telling a story. Do you want them to be a gossip? Do you want them to be someone who enjoys talking about? It's kind of already something that we do as humans, but we want to just kind of keep ourselves in check with that, because the kids will love that feeling too. Is like, oh, I'm just, before you know it, you're actually talking really bad about somebody. And you're like, uh-oh, I've walked into some territory that I really wouldn't want my kid to talk bad about people. I would actually be against that. But we're under our roof and we think it's so funny and they did that again. It's like there's that fine line, and be careful, because yes, you're going to sometimes just dislike a family, a kid, or whatever, their personality, what they do. But if you're also engaging in making fun of them, I've had parents that have kind of like low key made fun of maybe a student that has disabilities. And then that kid does that low key on the playground and gets in trouble. The parent doesn't realize that their little jokes are coming out. So it's just a sidebar of keep in mind your communication matters, of the things that you're modeling as well. All right. But they also enjoy it. They like, oh, if I get in the car and start talking about this, we're going to have great conversation. What happens when they talk about something that went well? Do you engage in the same type of conversation? Have the same energy? In fact, I have a rule where if you're going to tell me something that went wrong, you also need to tell me something that went well, because I know for a fact that there were that many things, if not better, that happened that went well. So I'm going to challenge their brain to tell me about those things. Tell me about what worked. The things that worked, I want to hear about. I want to talk about them. I want to highlight them. I want to talk about even the process of how they got there. You get to choose. Okay, bottom line. You as the parent do have some control. Sometimes we feel like we don't have much control. As they get older, they talk to us less and less, and they're just talking to their friends. We do, though, have some control over our communication. And if we want them to be solution focused themselves, we need to make sure that we are not focusing on the problem talk or ending the conversation there, or then moving into the zone that we just talked about of kind of like maybe making fun of or making jest, right? And no problem solving actually happened, right? So these are some of the tricks and tips to hear the whole story from your child. There's more than they want to tell you. There's more that is inside their brain that they can share. Now, what are some of the reasons they don't share? For those people that say they say very little, or they only want to say what's going wrong, or they, I don't know what's going on at school. Well, think about these things. First of all, what time of day are you talking to them? Every kid has a different talkative time of day. And we want to tap into that time. It's the natural time when their brain is working. Their brain is just all over. For me, I found that the mornings, my mind is just on fire with thoughts and ideas. And that's when I want to make all of my mental notes. And sometimes I'm talking to my husband. He's like, my goodness, we just woke up. I'm not even thinking about any of that stuff. But for you, if your goal is to bond with your kid and they're not talking to you at the time that you want to talk, then look for other times to talk. Look for the time that they're interested, and then notice it when that comes up. If they all of a sudden out of nowhere go, you wouldn't believe what happened in math class. Oh my gosh, this kid. And you are in the middle of, sometimes you're going to be in the middle of stuff, but you're in the middle of something. You're like, okay. In that way, and maybe not that way so deliberately, but in some way you kind of like quicken the conversation. Look, you just dismissed them And they're probably not going to come to you again with another story. They'll be like, oh, my mom doesn't want to hear. My dad doesn't want to hear. So it's a good idea to pause, be like, what happened? And let them tell you, whether you're interested for real or not, because this is establishing communication moving forward. My daughter went through a time when she just wasn't talking to me much about what was happening in high school. And then all of a sudden she told me this story. I don't know, I may have shared this with you before in another podcast because now it's just plastered in my brain about this student in AP literature of all classes who, when they had a substitute, took out all of these things in his backpack. And what were they? They were the items he needed to pierce his own ears. And that was his goal for the day. And literally there in class, he pierced his own ears. And the whole story of that, and my daughter telling me was alarmingly detailed, and I never will forget it. To think that this substitute was no more than, 10, 15 feet away while this kid is, anyway, it happened, and she shared it with me. I was on the edge of my seat. Now that story, it deserves that. But you know what? I wasn't like, what is happening at this school? Oh my gosh, like who is watching? What's wrong with that sub? She wanted to tell me about a story from her point of view that she witnessed in that class. Be in the moment. Listen to the details. What happened next? How did he react? Oh my gosh. You know what I mean? Be there in the moment when they thought of it and they want to share it with you. I sure am glad I was, because it was a bonding. We still laugh about it. And then when she refers to that student who tends to be in her class, she'll be like, you know that kid that pierced his ears? Be like, oh yeah, I remember that kid. So take advantage of those moments, right? Look for the time that they want to talk. The other tip is, okay, so overreacting. I mentioned it, I think, a little bit ago, but do you overreact too quickly to what they're saying? Do they say something that puts up alarm bells? It's like, alarm bell, that shouldn't have happened. I don't like that. Or alarm bell, you messed up. You should have never done that. You know you can get in trouble for that. Oh my goodness, you guys, I have to work on this so much as a parent. You can't believe it. Like, zip it and wait and say, what else? And don't be too quick to butt in. Don't be too quick to take over the conversation, or you are going to shut them down and they're not going to come to you next time. Is that what you want? It's usually not what we want. So why do we do that? I don't know. Why do we say, oh my goodness, stop right there? You know you're not supposed to be da 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 da. You would have never been in that situation if you weren't la 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 la. You know what I mean? Either you make it automatic, like I got to train you right now, or you're like, wait a minute. You say the teacher said what? That is exactly the problem with schools today. No. Pump the brakes, as I say many times, and I have to tell myself, look, my goal is to have a good communication with this person. Let them finish talking. Find out what they did to get through it. Find out what they see as a success or a failure, what actually bothered them, if anything. And then we'll always have time to circle back to the things that need to be talked about. And the next thing, this is something I should have probably started with, is why are we asking what happened today at school if most of the time the answer we get is nothing? I don't know. It seems like the right question to ask. What happened at school is a pretty obvious thing. What happened at work? What happened here? What happened there? And the kids answer, I don't know, because nothing is in their brain at that time. So I encourage you to think of different questions. If that question isn't working, think of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 more that you can sprinkle in throughout the rest of that time. If your communication matters to you, you'll do it to where you're like, hey, is there anything in the day that surprised you? Is there anything today that caught you off guard? Is there anything today that was alarming? Was there anything today that happened that went well? Again, one of my favorites, what went well? Not to be like overly positive, but just so they can share a good story. Was there anything that made you smile, made you laugh? how many people did you play with today? You could get into like, depending on the personality of your kid, how many people did you play with while you were on the playground? What game did you play? What was your favorite part of the day in the classroom? What was your favorite part of the day out of the classroom? Hey, what is you guys' lines like? Do you guys stand quietly in line or not in line? Oh, don't you guys go to library on Thursdays? How did you choose your book? Think of questions. And then it's an experiment from you, right? Like what do they perk up at? What do they be like? Oh yeah, that happened. Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe, right? So if you're hearing nothing but the same drama that's happening between the same girls, with girl drama that always seems to happen about, I don't know, 3rd and 4th grade with all the girls and their drama. If that's the only story you hear, then your thought is, I want to hear some other stories. I want to hear some other things that are happening so I can get the full picture of how this person's life is. It is not all conflict. So what else is going on? And I guarantee you that you are going to have not only a more enriching relationship with your child as they grow older, but you are going to find moments that you're proud, that you're laughing together, and you're just going to feel more at peace because you know that there's a lot going on in your kid's life, and their entire time is full of many joyful moments and some joyful moments, just like it is on the average weekend at home or an average vacation. Tell me about your vacation. Hopefully they tell you about the roller coaster they went on or the fun they had. They could also tell you about how everyone was screaming before they left the hotel room because you almost missed the movie. Hopefully we don't get that story, right? So why do we want those negative stories every single time they pop in to us? It's just a thought. Let's kind of like see how we can rearrange this whole thing. And if you're a parent that hears all of the great stuff all the time, also allow them to continue the conversation to say, what else happened? What else? Use the magic what else for them to go beyond what they usually tell you, and then maybe tell you something a little deeper about, many times I'll say, what did you think about that? I'm really careful about how you feel about that. And I'm careful about that now, not because I don't want them to acknowledge feelings, but because feelings can be very misleading. I want them to know about how they think about it, because how they think about it determines how they act. And if they're acting out of feelings, they might be reactive, where thinking is proactive. Anyway, you know me, I could just go on and on with these things that pop into my mind, but this podcast has got to be over. And to the parents that I'm reaching out to, hey, communicate with your kids and love every minute of it. It goes so fast. I'm looking at my daughter graduating from high school and I'm like, where is the time gone? So enjoy the moments, both the good and the bad. Have things that you can enjoy in them, believe it or not. And also know that, a couple of orders of business, I guess. One, I am going to put out the interview I told you about, but I guess there needed to be some clearances that needed to happen since our guest was in the military. So we are going to get that out. Don't worry. I realized that this is all of a sudden out of nowhere felt like a monthly podcast instead of a weekly one. I don't want it to be that way. But ramp has definitely been a lot, and a lot of things that I've been doing has been pulling my attention. You've got to kind of like choose in life. So I'm going to keep on communicating with you, but then sometimes you'll find that we communicate differently. But pretty soon we're going to get back in that weekly groove. And I appreciate you staying with me on this podcast. And also just like the ramp process, I haven't given you an update. I went through all my paperwork and decided to try and put it together for this year's ramp instead of next year's. I don't know how it's going to end up going, to be honest, because there's a lot of details that maybe I didn't fully focus on, but I'm kind of like having to go back and focus on. But I'm hoping it goes well because I had an amazing year last year and the data that I collected was great. So I'm right in the process right now of late nights and lots of hard work. And that's about as much as the update as I can give you on that one. It's time for us to get going. Don't forget, you have permission to share this with anybody that would like hope-centered, solution-focused communication for their life, for their family, for their work. for them to thrive. And it's time for us to get going. So until next time, live solution focused.